Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final Andor Wednesday for a couple years because season two is
Oh
coming, but
yeah.
it's going to take a while. Uh, I'm Eric. We got Lon, and with Emma on vacation, Kim, thank you for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So yeah, we right before most of us take off for Thanksgiving break, we got the season finale of Andor. We're going to dig into that in a moment. Full spoilers if you haven't seen it, so you've been warned. It's called Rick's Road, which I think is a bold thing to do on a show with a character named Bix.
Mhm.
But why not? So spoiler warning, 3, 2, 1, full spoiler zone. Guys, obviously this has been a very well received show. We've been definitely digging it. Kim, I know you haven't been on the videos as much with us, but I know you have been too. But what everyone think of the season finale of Andor here?
Well, I loved it. I mean, and it's a series that's been really consistently great. But I think, the finale brings it full circle. We get the big climax on Ferrix, which is where we started. And I love that as Marva dies, Cassian's adoptive mother, he's kind of born into becoming this fully fledged member of the rebellion. And it's through her speech is one of the things that we'll talk about later, but that kind of sparks this desire to become a part of the cause. Amongst other things, there are many things that we've seen throughout the series that contribute towards that, and I think it's been brilliantly done. For people who criticize the Book of Boba Fett, this series of for not showing enough Boba Fett, this has been all about Cassian's evolution, and that's where we end up in the finale.
Yeah, I was really glad. A lot of these Star Wars shows, I think I mentioned this even last week, they kind of resolve in a similar way, where it's like a bunch of the Imperial guys are outside the door, and our heroes are all trapped or pinned down, and it's like this standoff kind of thing, how they're going to escape, how they're going to fight their way out. Deus Ex Machina, maybe a Jedi shows up or something. And so there was action. It felt like a climactic episode, but it was very character driven. It was very driven by the drama. It didn't feel like we were building towards sort of an artificial, like, well, now it's going to be a big chase, or now we got to have a big fight because it's the end of a Star Wars, show. And there wasn't even really like, there isn't a moment between like Mira and Andor having it out. There's
Yeah.
no, it does, we're not building to a face off like we usually would think of Star Wars as sort of doing in that sort of lightsaber standoff kind of paradigm. Instead, it felt like, the season really ends on this. It's the spark that starts the formal rebellion. Like that's
Mhm.
what the climax was, as opposed to a fight or a duel or a face off. And I thought that was very refreshing.
Yeah, I agree. It felt very Andor that they sort of took their time with first the procession, for Marva, like get some decent screen time, and then of course her speech, which is integral. But to your point, Lon, it's like it's a big moment. Obviously, the sort of uprising on Ferrix. It's not in and of itself going to accomplish anything. It's not like we beat the Empire; they're gone. But of course, as you mentioned, it speaks to what Marva says a little bit in her speech to everyone, but also even more so in what Brasso passes on to her to him and other things that he gets from the message from Nemec, which is
Right.
it's like all the little things
Exactly.
that will
That's
build one on top of the other.
It's the opening. We get Nemec, we tease Nemec's manifesto at the start of the season, and then it pays off here. Right. The idea that it's not one journey, like it's not the rebellion forms here and does this and does that, and then the end of the empire. It's a bunch of little actions that build over time and coalesce into a formal sort of rebellion. And this is sort of just one of those ongoing, which is all rooted in, again, real history. We keep coming back to this idea that the
Mhm.
show is so carefully modeled on actual historical rebellions. It really feels like it's paying attention to them in a way that Star Wars usually doesn't. Well, there's more I want to talk about with that later, but
Well, I wanted to say I love how this uprising kind of recalls what happened on Aldani. There was the Aldani people that made it to their ritual, and it's about um, customs, local customs, and here the local custom was the way that they throw a funeral. and the importance, and Marva kind of talks about this, the importance of those things for, I suppose, togetherness, and this idea that Andor has running through it about the importance of kind of teamwork and working together. And the Empire wants to quash what's happening on Aldhani as much as it wants to kind of control this funeral, and because it knows the power that these kinds of things have for people.
And it works both ways. I mean, we also get that message about the Empire, sort of Anto Krieger and his mission in the Empire sort of taking over. And very explicitly, ISB is saying it's partly about strategy, but it's also getting that bad taste out of the Emperor's mouth. Like, right. Symbolic action matters for him too. He feels bad, slighted by Aldhani, and he wants to like get back at them. And so it is personal on both sides. It's as much about strategy and accomplishing real goals, but it is also about sending a message and communicating through these kind of violent actions.
And to your point, Kim, about sort of Marva and her, I really liked her sort of hometown pride, because this is not unique to Star Wars. It's happened a lot in Star Wars, but other fiction as well, which is your hero is like, I want to get out of this small town. And of course, Luke did that. And then we had Rey, and it's, it's a tradition of like, I don't want to be in this little place that feels like nowhere. So I really liked sort of a counterpoint was Marva being like, hey, these are my people. I am very proud of this place. I don't care that it's like, might be seen as like a smaller place. There's a lot of tradition and history here. And yeah, we get through her talking about remembering when she was 6 years old, the first time she sort of saw this whole ceremony. And I actually thought it was really great. The second time I watched this episode, some things kind of hit me harder. And one of them was Bix, who's obviously been so sort of gone through so much hell. When she starts to, both hum along to the music, but also kind of recite some of the things she's hearing. And it's like, oh yeah, this is her society. She's heard all these things and it's meaningful to her too. So I thought it was just kind of a nice counterpoint to what we're used to in fiction in general, but Star Wars as well, of like, this is the place to leave. It's like, no, this is symbolic because all these places need to kind of coalesce and rise up together. And Ferrix is just kind of one example of that. Let's talk about Cyril and Miro, who have been such a sort of fascinating part of this show. I have such weird, like kind of uncomfortable feelings with them, but I kind of like that I do. What do you think of how things played out between the two of them here, with him ultimately rescuing her?
Well, I mean, it really felt like in those moments after when she realizes who it is that they were gonna kiss.
Right.
Yeah, they filmed it in a way that I think suggests the, in a lot of, especially in Star Wars, but in a lot of generic kind of action adventure, like this moment they would kiss. And I think there was an awareness of that in the way they shot it.
Yeah, but there was that moment earlier when Cyril was on the bus with Moss, and they've got an interesting relationship too, and they traded hats, didn't they? And and I thought that maybe there was a spark between them, so maybe we're looking at a love triangle in the next
Oh, interesting. I read that. It's a very odd moment. I went back and rewatched it, the trading hats. The second time I went through, I felt like they were trading back. Like, it looks like they end up with the hats they brought with them. So I think that when they were on the trend, they were like, "Hey, let's switch hats." Oh, you know what? This doesn't work as well. But you're right. Like, it feels like they're going back to their original pattern, which is
you're making me think, if anyone gets this reference, at What Hot American Summer, when two characters keep trading shirts.
Yeah, right.
They keep saying they're
like
cold.
that's kind of what it felt like. Like these two goofballs, like they can't kind of decide. Like that's what it felt like to me. Yeah,
it's a romance.
Right. Yeah, I think it's so interesting because, again, these characters kind of keep you on your toes because, as we talked about, not good people, especially her. But then it's like he's been sort of creepy and stalkerish. But then it's like, again, because this show, she is one of her point of view characters. So it feels, you feel her fear when she's going to be like trampled and torn apart by a crowd who has every reason to trample and tear her apart. But you feel like for her as a human in that moment that this is absolutely terrifying. So I do like, of course, it's like, it'll all be kind of seeing where they go in season 2, but it's just very interesting because then also I'm like, oh, Miro, watch out for this guy. He's fully stalking you, but I know he saved you. But you're a fascist. So.
It is something I think they're baking this into the Imperial characters a bit. That you know, the people in the rebellion, the everyday people, they kind of live on the ground. Like they understand what's going on. They're very connected to this world and what the Empire is and how it works. But the people who like live on Coruscant and work for the Empire, they're very sheltered. And I feel like the show is purposefully giving us that. There's always layers of like civilization between them and the consequences of what they're doing. And when you put one of them in one of these scenarios, suddenly they're lost. Like they're very good in a boardroom,
right?
But when you put them on the ground with a gun and there's a crowd coming at them, suddenly they freeze up. They're not soldiers. And I think that we played around with that in a few contexts so far. And Miro in this episode, I think, is another chance where she's so tough in an interrogation room or in a boardroom in her environment. But you put her out here on this chaotic street and she's not Luthen. She's not an operator who immediately is like clocking the exits and figuring out. Like she's kind of helpless when it comes to actually fighting.
Right. By the way, you mentioned that when Partagaz has that line about wiping the taste of Aldani from the Emperor's mouth.
Right.
And then he follows that up with, do you want to start a conversation, find access? And it's funny because as much as this show, I think to its credit, it's for the best. So we've not seen a single lightsaber, no Skywalkers. I'm like, I guess you could have Palpatine. I don't think you could have him a bunch, but I would be very curious if Miro ever spoke to Palpatine, how that would go, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're purposefully being kept like, at least for now, maybe like towards the very, like the post-credit scene feels like the first time this show has really been like, let's take a huge step back and show you the macro level consequences of what's happening. I feel like that was the first indication we almost had of like, no, this is still impacting the wider Star Wars universe.
Yeah. And Kim, you brought up, it's interesting because this season, you know, it's certainly, we saw at the end Cassian make that decision to join the rebellion. You know, spoiler alert, Luthen's not going to kill him. That part we know. And I think to the credit, I mean, I'm very curious if they had stuck with the 5-year plan for this show, how 5-season plan, how different it might be. But yeah, it's like, it's time for him to join up. What do you guys think? You know, I was having a friendly debate with my friend Alan Sepinwall, the critic for Rolling Stone, who felt like Cassian was actually a little too passive in this finale because it's like he's like more on the outskirts. He rescues Bix, but he's not like right in the center of what's happening. I actually liked that. It was kind of about him, but he wasn't right in the thick of it. You know, did you want to see him step up more, or did this feel like the appropriate sort of level for him to be involved at this point?
I think it did feel appropriate. You know, the whole series, as I said so far, has been about the importance of banding together. And as much as it's a show about Cassian Andor's evolution, it's also a show about the evolution of the rebellion, you know, and Luthen wants to unite all the different factions to create the alliance. And so it makes sense to kind of to sideline him a little bit and give him the job of rescuing the love of his life, who will inevitably die, I think, eventually. Because he uses everyone.
Not in Rogue One, folks.
Not in Rogue One. And neither is B. So unless they all, you know, remain happily together on that moon they've headed for. Who knows?
No offense to Mr. Sepinwall, a great critic, a guy I like to read a lot. But that reminds me of like a network studio note, you know, like the show's called Andor. Why isn't there more Andor? Like he's in it. I think we get what we need from him and the completion of history, but it almost feels to me like a lot of his arc kind of completed a little earlier in the season. We had his final sort of conversation with Marva that I feel like tied up a lot. His escape from the prison obviously solidified a lot of his feelings about the Empire and what needs to be done. I kind of feel like we kind of dealt with a lot of that, and now it was time to like lay the groundwork for season 2, and that's what a lot of this was doing. And I feel like that was very effective. And like, sure, there's an argument to be like, the show's called Andor. Why isn't Andor at the center of everything? But like, I don't care so much about that if what's happening is important and interesting and vital like it was.
the analogy I started to think about with it, because I like, the use of Cassian. I mean, I think he's an interesting character, but of course he notably doesn't say that much on a show that's very dialogue heavy. But then I thought, it's almost like he's Mad Max and Fury Road, where it's like, he's crucial to the story. He's got a lot to do, but a lot of the other characters are sort of driving, like they're talking more, they get these monologues more. But I still think you're still seeing his arc, his path, both through action and, just even Diego Luna just showing the expressions this guy's going through.
That's kind of fundamental to the episodic nature of these TV shows. And so, I mean, The Mandalorian too, like for a lot of season 1,
faceless character.
Right. And he's like landing on a planet, like, what's going on? What's this village's problem? It's like that they're paladin and have gun will travel. It's like we've got the basics of who they are, but then it's about the mission that week. It's about, these claim jumpers have got to be stopped, or they're going to steal our ranch, whatever.
Right.
So I feel like it's that, like Andor was a bit of that. It was like, well, now we're going to meet, he's at the prison, we're going to meet the prison team. And now he's at Eldani, we're going to meet the Eldani team. And
I think the show's done a really good job of building up these characters who might not be major characters in terms of us seeing them a lot, but they're really well rounded, like Brasso and Zan, who we all kind of feel a lot of affection for. They're 3-dimensional, so give them. It makes sense to me to give them their time in the spotlight. R.I.P. Zan. That was sad.
A light criticism I had of this episode, because I agree with you, Kim. Brasso's great. Like, just sort of like we saw him just enough for him to like, understand where he's coming from, make an impact. Light criticism I did have of this finale was they kind of immersed us with a lot of the Ferrix locals who'd had very minimal screen time. So there's a couple times where a couple people are like talking about, does Cassian know if Marva died or not? And I'm like, I kind of know who you are, but I don't fully know who you are. But I understand that with a lot of plates to juggle, even with 12 episodes, there wasn't like, here's an episode completely on Ferrix without Cassian or Bix, just like everyone else there.
But I took from that the whole, although we may not have had chance to spend a lot of time with these people, they all really loved and respected and knew Marva, and that was important.
Yes.
Yeah, I think agree. we covered a lot of ground with that Daughters of Ferrix, like that is her sort of explanation for how she's so plugged in, and like she knew everybody because she was part of this very active community organization, and so I feel like they got a lot of shorthand out of that.
Yeah, there was a line one of the local Imperials says to Miro, "Oh, she was a local annoyance." Which, it's like, it's, while not a new idea in Star Wars, it's like the idea of like the little people that you're overlooking that can cause you big problems.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, they because Miro's whole plan is like, oh yeah, let the Daughters of Ferrix get their funeral because it helps me, not sort of thinking like what they're, escalating here with that all. By the way, guys, we B2 Emo, very concerned when he got knocked over.
Oh yeah.
So was everybody else. That was the spark that ignited the uprising.
Right. They all start screaming.
Not B2 Emo. No, I'm not having that.
And by the way, is there anything more badass than after you die, you get turned into a brick, and then your friend uses that brick to hit a fascist in the face? Because that Brasso was swinging the Marva brick after this. Yeah, there we go. Frick those guys.
Amazing.
Yes, that's what else could we want in our death? But
there you go.
We used to hit some Nazis.
I talked a little bit about like the show is so obviously reflecting like some real world history and trying to bake it, and like I think this episode, I mean, obviously it's you can't watch it and not think of real world protests, fights of protesters and the police, and I mean it was echoing all of that kind of imagery. I also was reading this week, I saw somebody, I just wanted to mention this, and I posted a reminder last week, like somebody remind me of this. There is a fascinating connection between Aldani and a real, like, part of the Russian Revolution was funded by these heists, and one big bank heist that helped to fund some of the Soviet revolution was actually masterminded by Joseph Stalin. And there's some fascinating connections between that and Aldani. Like Tony Gilroy may have actually been drawing real inspiration from the Soviet revolution in that plot line. And so, I mean, like, I think that's always fascinating to try to give Star Wars, it's fantasy, but to try to give it that kind of relevance that it can have, or that it had in the 70s when George Lucas was first writing it.
Right. Because it all goes back to him having as much as there are certain people who go, don't make Star Wars political, as the rest of us will point out, it always was political. And George Lucas was on the record about the Vietnam influence.
The Vietnam comparisons are sort of pretty plain, and the Imperials are obviously echoing World War II and Nazis, and with the costumes and
even the taking over of the hotel on Ferrix is something that the Nazis did.
Sure. Oh, I mean, the whole, like, anything, a lot of this show where they're doing, and it's not just this show either. I mean, I think even J.J. Abrams in Rise of Skywalker, there's that planet that's kind of like been invaded and is in the process, it's like where the Spice Runners all live. I'm blanking on the name of this planet. Where Kerry Russell's from.
Where Kerry Russell is.
Yes. Planet Kerry Russell.
Planet Felicity.
That's very modeled on like a World War II film, like a French town that's under, the control of the Nazis or whatever. Like, that was obviously the model there. And I think with Ferrix too, as Kid would say, clearly it's like, it's an occupied town. There's Imperial garrisons on every corner because they're trying to keep control over this town.
Let's talk a little bit. Mon Mothma is such an interesting part of the show. I mean, she's a literally interesting part of the show, but of course, she's very separate from Cassian this season. That will obviously change at some point in season 2, when they will, meet up on Yavin, if nothing else. But she had a couple of key scenes here. It was interesting when I rewatched the scene with Perrin. The first time I saw it, I thought, okay, she calls him out on this gambling that's getting her, getting them in hot water. And he's adamant that this isn't true. And the second time I watched it, I thought he might be telling the truth. Like,
I think he is. Yes. She knows the driver's listening to them. And so this is her way of throwing the Empire off. She wants exactly what happens is what she wanted to happen, for the Empire. She's offering an alternate explanation for the financial confusion rather than she's using this money to fund the rebellion.
Yeah, I love that with Blevin, because it's like, again, this because it's been such a kind of fun part of the show is this sort of inner squabbling face off in the ISB. And it's funny because, again, we all snarked on the prequels and the Trade Federation and the trade routes and stuff that was just boring and stayed boring. But this show is making like stuff that could be boring interesting. Like, how do you deal with the money? How do you deal with the missing money and account for it? And so her pointing a finger at her husband, known gambling addict.
Right. And I think, when they said, it's a spy thriller in the Star Wars universe, like, I think we were all picturing, it's just a Star Wars thing, but the guy's going to have a hood that he throws up over his head during his missions. He's like, he's going to try to be stealthy about it. And I don't think any of us really saw like, oh no, he's going very deep into the spy genre and really trying to bring as much of like a classic spy drama and the tropes and the trappings of that into Star Wars.
I mean, they do throw up hoods as well, Lon.
They do. Luthen totally does that. That's part of it. But I mean, like, it goes a little deeper than that as well, which I didn't think I wasn't expecting.
That would be a good montage, the Star Wars dramatically putting up your hood.
It's like their version of, in the MCU, when you want to be undercover, you put a baseball cap on. And then the Star Wars version of that is you put your hood up, and then nobody can tell who you are.
And then we got a mention of Canto Bite for you world builders and you Last Jedi fans. I know that's a divisive thing to say forever, but Canto Bite got a mention here, which makes sense because, again, in Star Wars, where things have been around forever, we don't necessarily have to think that Canto Bite just sprung up in the sequel era. It could have been a swinging. Or maybe Canto Bite in this era is like early Vegas. It's
it's a little weird just because, like, obviously they're using, Canto Bight is like their analog for Vegas or whatever. Right. But Vegas is Vegas because you can't gamble everywhere in America, or at least you couldn't. Like now with Indian gaming or whatever, it's like you mostly can. But the idea of like Atlantic City and Vegas being gambling destinations because you couldn't just gamble in your town. But in Star Wars, you just everybody loves gambling in Star Wars. It's like the number one activity. So like, why would you need Canto Bight in a weird way? Like, are there planets where gambling's not allowed? We've never been to one, right?
I mean, maybe it is illegal, but they're just doing it, underground. Maybe.
I mean, like Lando's playing sabacc wherever. It doesn't really seem like he's got to go to a designated card room for that.
But he's a scoundrel.
Maybe. Right. I mean, that could be it too. Like we spend so much time in like underground Mos Eisley kind of places that we're used to seeing gambling everywhere.
Something on Morlana 1 about the brothel not really being something that they should have. So, gambling dens of iniquity as well. Maybe
it's all probably different levels of how many people are looking the other way depending on where you are.
Because there was a casino like in Boba Fett, like Tatooine had one. So it's like
Tatooine's outer rim. I think we can.
Like those people don't need to go to Canto Bight.
Right.
Like a poker room.
I'm not. It wasn't clear if there was gambling going on in the sort of sports bar in Attack of the Clones they walk into.
They're watching. It's almost like they're watching robots playing sports. So maybe they're betting.
So maybe. Let's look into that. Let's talk about the post-credit scene, which existed, happened. We didn't necessarily know that was going to happen on this show at all. Certainly, the biggest Star Wars universe moment of this show. But of course, one that ties back in the show. Not that we hadn't, you had to throw out every possibility for what were they building in the prison. But we got the answer here. What do you guys think of that it is indeed the biggest thing they could possibly be building, literally, the Death Star?
Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, it was, I thought it was pretty obvious that that's what they were building in the prison. Here it's interesting because, you've got the robots that are building it. And there was that whole conversation they had around humans versus robot labor and the droids being more expensive. Ultimately, but anyway, that's what's happening here, and I hope what it means is that we'll get a Galen Erso cameo in the next season.
Mads is around. I mean, it's interesting. I think we all sort of guessed it's got to be a Death Star component. That's why it's so important and urgent what they're building or whatever why they need so many of them. Gilroy is really laying this on thick in both Rogue One and then this, that the Death Star is the Empire's plan, like the long-term plan. It's all wrapped up in the Death Star. That's how they're going to control the galaxy long-term. It's like, well, just come blow up your planet if you don't listen to us. And I don't think that comes through in A New Hope. In A New Hope, it feels like this is like Darth Vader's new toy or whatever. Like it's definitely a big, imposing threat, but it's treated as kind of like, oh, that Empire, they're always up to something. Check out this new thing. It's a Death Star. Can you believe it? It's a moon-sized weapon. But in now that we're going back and we're doing Rogue One and then this, it's like, oh no, it was all culminating. As soon as the Emperor drafted Darth Vader and brought him on board, he's like, check this out. This is what we're going to build next, right? Like, I think that's interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I don't necessarily love that.
I think I'm okay with it only because I guess it's sort of I wouldn't say necessarily evil, just a necessary component of the fact that this has become such a long-running franchise. Because when Lucas makes Star Wars, he's like, it's like we're in the middle of a serial that's already been going.
Right, and serial. I think that's what I kind of don't love about it is it's giving it such a linear, like, this was all the Emperor really had. Like even in the early stages of his plan, it was like, find apprentice, become Emperor, like start Empire, build big laser that can blow up planet. Because then even after that, it's like, well, then there's a second Death Star. Then there's like, I'm going to build a whole fleet with little mini Death Stars on the bottom that can shoot Death Star rays. And it's just like, what is with this? The weird obsession with this laser
It's pretty persuasive to me.
It is, but I mean, like they're already capable of massive amounts of global destruction.
I think I'm okay with it only because as we've gone on, there's been so much more context. Like in the original Star Wars, the Emperor's dissolved the Senate, which is like a throwaway line for us originally.
Right.
But now it's like, oh, throwing away the Senate that's been around since the prequels, and like sort of seeing that, like, yeah, it was all leading to this, as you said, Lon. But I guess that like I'm okay with it because we've seen all the big components. I mentioned that I watched this episode twice, and the first time I liked it a lot, but the second time, for whatever reason, a lot of things sort of hit me harder. And so the post-credit scene, I was like, that's fun. We figured that probably is what they're building. That's cool. But it did hit me harder the second time. That's like the dark, like ironic thing of like Cassian building the weapon that killed him. It's like that. I was like, oh, that's grim. It's darkly, I guess, cosmically comedic in like the darkest way. Is like, you will be locked up in a prison and build the weapon of your demise.
And just how this like completely abstract thing that he's never heard about is like
Right.
His whole life is really revolving around it, even though he's not aware of it. It's why he was in prison. It's the thing he's going to have to go. His final mission in life is going to be the plans for this thing. Like his whole life is wrapped up in this. And I think that's kind of like some of the thematic stuff it's getting at, how we're, on an individual level, everybody's a pawn of these sort of macro, sort of events that are happening.
I like that they built in this sense of destiny, because Star Wars has always been about destiny. Luke Skywalker's destiny, Darth Vader banged on about that, So it makes sense to me, and I like that synchronicity.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too, even though this show obviously is not about like the Force in that way. Just sort of like the bigger sort of scale of like, yeah, like the sort of, the cosmic connections that are not in like a Obi-Wan Kenobi way, but just like, we're all trapped in this, in a world not of our making. I did think it was funny. And I don't think
like Howard the Duck, he's trapped in a world he never made.
I don't think Tony Gilroy meant this as some FU or something, but it is funny, almost underlining how this show is so different from other Star Wars, that Nemec's big emotional message that, we hear in voice, it's being read, but we have the device of hearing his voice, ends with, remember this, try, which is exactly the opposite of Yoda's teaching.
Yes.
It's like, if you don't have the Force, try.
Just try it.
Yes, that's what we got to do. We're going to do AMA in a moment. But thank you guys, obviously, for all watching. Please like and subscribe if you have not. Right now on this very channel, you can see Kim and I. There are reviews up that just posted in the past 24 hours of Glass Onion, the Knives Out sequel, and of the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which is debuting this weekend. So you can check that out on the Fandom Entertainment YouTube channel. And then I believe in the description of this video, there should be a link to my interview with Tony Gilroy. And this is an interview I did with him that was like a post-mort season interview. I only had 10 minutes with him. I wish I had more time because I had a bunch more stuff I'd love to go over. But we talked about sort of, like his thinking on his approach to a lot of this and the Death Star of it all. And actually, really, I don't know if you guys have seen that interview, but I actually thought it was interesting what he said about Marva and how the biggest reason he chose to keep her death off screen was because he felt like the hologram accomplished everything a deathbed scene could have done, but better. Yeah. And now that I've seen it, I go, I get that,
Yeah, I totally get that, I think.
I think it's in keeping with her character as well. She was a proud woman, and it wouldn't, I don't think it would have necessarily been right to see her death on screen for that reason. And she wanted to be strong and rebellious, and yeah, keep her death off screen.
Especially with Cassian not there, it's like, I feel like, this.
Yeah, I mean, what would that see? We got her say goodbye to Cassian. We got her sort of final message in this episode anyway, and her sort of party. There wouldn't have been anything else to accomplish in that scene. It would have just been literally like, I'm dead. Like, give Fiona Shaw a chance to act the act of dying, but I don't really know why. I don't think we needed to see that.
I'm sure she would have been great.
Right.
But and I loved, I mean, this finale, like, they definitely got to like, they got to do two things, which is like Brasso passes on to her pass on to Cassian the personal message. Like, here's what she wanted you to know. But then, of course, everyone hears her message, including Cassian, that's meant to, you know, say, fight the Empire. And I really liked, you know, when he gets to Bix, and again, she's kind of out of it, but she says, Marva was here, and he's like, wasn't she great? And I thought that was like a really sweet moment. You know, that, yeah, that a hologram accomplished a lot, damn it.
Yeah, and also keeping her death off screen, you know, kind of keeps her alive, doesn't it? So in their eyes and everyone's, the rebellion's eyes.
Yep. Let's see. So some of the AMA here, Kaori, if I'm pronouncing that right. Marching Band Dirge gave me goosebumps. Best original soundtrack since the original trilogy. I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, Mandalorian has great music too, but I love the score to Andor. I thought, I don't know, that was really, really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I love that we just recently, I feel like we've started exploring the music of Star Wars beyond jizz. Like we for a long time, his music was the standard, and that was the kind of music. But then in Visions, we had that like pop punk Tatooine band. Now we've got a brass marching band here at Andor. I like that we're mixing it up as we travel further around the galaxy. They've got all kinds of different musical traditions going on. I like that.
Yeah, and the score itself, you know, that was non-diegetic. It was the prison sequences had the electronic music that was really effective in those scenes to create this kind of oppressive kind of. Some of it was quite distorted, and it felt really sinister. And then the rest of the time, I felt that the score was like really unintrusive, but so important to help with, you know, how we were supposed to feel, as opposed to being really in your face, that which I felt some scores recently have been. They've been too much, but this is just right.
Darth Relum, I saw Bailey joking about this too on Twitter. Stormtrooper armor is useless. Family Guy was right. One of them was taken out by a headbutt. Why bother? I mean, look, yeah. Since the original Star Wars, they have never stood up to a single blaster. You can headbutt them.
Are they? It's. I mean, at this point, I think we can read it as: is that intended as armor, or are those just their uniforms? Because at this point, I feel like it does look like a helmet, but you could say, well, but that's also to make them imposing. Like helmets, first of all, just kind of de rigueur in the Star Wars universe. Anybody's got one. But I also feel like it's to make them all look the same, and to make them look like immediately identifiable as stormtroopers, and to make them like imposing, as much as it is protecting the face, which clearly it does not really do very effectively. So I think you could almost explain this away in universe, that stormtroopers outfits are meant to be aesthetic, not functional.
I think they actually kind of did, Lon. Obviously, it was done with a little wink, but on Rebels, when they brought Captain Rex back from the Clone Wars, I think he had a couple lines about cheap stormtrooper, because he had to dress like a stormtrooper.
Yeah.
And I think they threw in about, this is so much cheaper than the clone trooper armor.
Right.
Because
it is, in some ways, it's iconography. It's part of the threat of the Empire, is that there's just like this endless army of exactly the same looking guy. And you know, that image is, and the illusion of that is worth hanging on to, even if the armor itself is like, you could shoot a guy and he'll fall over.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said endless there, because they are expendable to the Empire. There is an endless supply. They don't need to protect them particularly. It's only important for them that they look menacing.
Mm-hmm. I think that is, if you want to come up with an in-universe explanation, it's also just we need them to be easy to take out, because the heroes need to take them out.
It's clearly not even important for the Empire that they can fire accurately. So
yeah, they're cannon fodder, and that's why they've always been. It's like henchmen, you know, you gotta have them.
I'm gonna get back to the AMA in a second, but I skipped over something I myself put in the script, so that was dumb of me. William, if you could prep the Wikipedia entry I wanted to spotlight, which is just, we have a page for Super Laser, because it's like, it wasn't just that they were building in the prison Death Star parts, they were building the laser. So very literally what's going to kill Cassian. So Super Laser, we have a page for, because that's, you know, this obviously the crucial thing on the Death Star. And Rogue One even went into the Kyber crystals used to power the Super Laser that they were mining on Jeddah. So you need the kyber crystals to power it. You need all those prisoners to build these little aspects of it.
And it takes a while too. You gotta like put the thing up, and then you gotta wait for it to power up fully. It's like it's a lot. It's a multi-step process.
That's right. And we're 5 years out from Rogue One here, and obviously the Death Star looks pretty done on the outside, but that laser is going to take some work. So
well, there's also all the interior. I don't know how you build a Death Star. I guess they start on the weapon part, because the one in Return of the Jedi is only half finished, but the laser already works. It's fully operational.
Right.
So I guess, yeah, you build the laser first, and then you build the case, and then you fill in all the interiors.
I think I did see a Gilroy interview where he did bring up, the classic Clerks conversation that that does end up being that your mind, when you're actually working on Star Wars and on stories about the Death Star, you do start to be like, who built it?
There is, now that I'm thinking about it, there is kind of a workplace comedy potential there of like the teams that are overseeing like the just day-to-day, contracting construction on the Death Star. Like that's a big project.
Yeah.
Imagine being like the guy who's like running, like Death Star work site, like there's a lot of ins and outs.
Death Star team building exercises.
Yeah. Kevin Smith maybe was on something.
Maybe that's what Kino Loy's gone on to do.
There you go. He turned around and got on board. DIY film says, we were mentioning, like, would we get Galen Erso? I want Mads and I want Felicity Jones back. Her story would be a perfect story with Andor's, and get Krennic back too. I mean, her story just obviously, while they're doing it with Mon Mothma as a parallel, Jyn can't meet Cassian, so I just don't see where Mon Mothma and him are going to intersect on the series. I just don't see Jyn fitting in, but I think Galen Erso is possible. I think Krennic is very likely.
Krennic would make sense just because he's already working in the Empire on Death Star related tasks at this point. Jyn Erso would be tough because at this point she's just like a thief. Like she's just kind of like, and she's not connected to the rebellion. So you would just have to find some other character who could interact with her in her dealings as a thief. It just feels like a stretch.
Yeah, I saw Gilroy say how he thinks it'd be interesting to explore more of her story, but I don't think in this show. I think that would
be a companion series. You could do her show.
He said when he did, because he's done obviously multiple rounds of press, he did some interviews after the prison storyline. And when he was asked by THR, what are they building in the prison? He had said, they're building the spine. They're building season 2. They're building the spine of season 2, which made me ask him, now that I saw this post-credit scene, like, were you being literal? And will season 2, will it keep following the Death Star? Which he didn't give me an exact answer for, but now I feel is very possible because, I'm reiterating what we've mentioned, but it's like season 2 is going to be these 4 3-episode stories that keep jumping ahead each year. And I think he's even said we'll only show like kind of 3 days each, like as we get closer to Rogue One. I don't think all of them will show the Death Star, but I wouldn't be shocked if one of them or 2 of them do check in on the Death Star again. And that's where you could have Ben Mendelsohn, for an episode or 2 pop up.
I feel like he would be kindred spirits with Blevin. There needs to be a
yes. I like that. They could be at the coffee machine together.
Yeah. And obviously I will throw out there, we're clearly not anti using digital face replacement, deep fake stuff. You could theoretically have the cartoon Tarkin.
You could
as well.
You could.
Like,
who probably would look better.
One.
Yeah.
I'm sure they could do the next generation of simulated Peter Cushing. I wouldn't rule it out entirely, especially I think now that we're establishing, it seems like the Death Star will probably be a setting on some level in season 2.
Yeah. Agreed. Chad WC Michael has a theory based on Luthen being a great hood putter on her. Am I the only one who thinks Luthen was a Jedi? And you're going all in on the Deidre is Cassian's sister.
Wow. Well, I will say that I thought this being the season finale, we were gonna pick up the sister thing because there's no way we're letting that drop for the whole show. Like so it did feel like, he's hoping by now we've forgotten that's Cassie was looking for his sister in the first episode, and we'll get like a little hint about it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing so far. So
Marva said let it go.
Right. But that was like episode 2 or 3. We really haven't heard about it in a long time. So I don't know if it's Miro is the answer. They don't look very much alike, which would be an issue. But I don't think it's that, but I think clearly somewhere in season 2 we'll pick that up again.
I hadn't thought about Luthen as a Jedi, but it is possible. I thought it was interesting in this episode that they made him look like Palpatine, actually, but I felt that was more to kind of illustrate the parallels between the two characters in terms of their methods, rather than indicating that he was Force sensitive, but possibly.
I don't think he will be because of the vibe of the show. I understand why in like the greater Star Wars it would come up as an idea. Even going to the fact that he basically was like everything changed for me 15 years ago, which was like the moment the Emperor took control, which would be Order 66. So I could see like in a different show that would be like, oh, he was a Jedi. But on this show, and with like the whole, I think they're going to keep this Jedi free. Even though I think it's not 100% impossible for Palpatine show up, I don't think he's going to be levitating anything if he did. Like, I think it's like on this show, they'd stay force free. And so I don't think Luthen would sort of, I don't think that's where Gilroy would go with Luthen on this series. I think there's the idea for someone kind of like Luthen who could be ex-Jedi. But I guess you can't kind of even have that with Kanan and some of the other characters that float around in greater Star Wars. Nimish Hindwan asked a question I was thinking about when which is, what happened to the Marva brick? Did someone pick it up? Because Brasso's not using it by the end of that battle fight sequence. He's using something else. So will the quest for the Marva brick be part of season 2, guys?
Maybe it's been secreted inside B2 Emo.
He'd love it.
Little hatch. The little drawer at the bottom.
Anything is possible. I hope even if it got destroyed, if it was destroyed, smashing some Empire, I think that's okay. I think Marva would have been cool with that too.
Yes.
Let's see here. Let's do this. Why not? Let's do I'm not saying anything about maybe we'll have a larger episode about this. But right now, in the wake of having just watched the Andor season finale, Zeno Hourhass, how would you rank the Star Wars Disney Plus shows?
I mean, this one's by far the best. I really feel like this one really sets a new standard. The others are fun, sort of like, oh, if you like Star Wars, here's a fun little thing. They're like little add-ons, supplements. This is the first one that feels like feels like it kind of stands on its own as like a new essential addition to the kind of Star Wars canon. I don't feel like all the other ones kind of play like bonus features on the existing Star Wars properties to me.
But you got to rank them, Lon. What's 2, 3, 4?
2.
Let's stick to live. Let's stick to live action.
2 would be Mandalorian. 3 would be Kenobi. I did not think the Boba Fett show was very good.
Mm-hmm. Kim?
And I would go Andor number 1. That is definitely a 5-star show for me. I love The Mandalorian, but that comes in at number 2. Book of Boba Fett for me is better than Obi-Wan, which I thought was not a good show. There was lots I liked and I thought was good about Boba Fett. So.
It's interesting because I one thing that I noticed on Twitter was like there was a lot of like, finally a good Star Wars show, which maybe roll my eyes because I'm like, most of us kind of were into Mandalorian, but I understand we're coming off of a year where we had 2 shows that were much more like splitting people and there was much more negativity around with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett. But yeah, I'm the same rankings as you, Lon, ultimately. This is my favorite because it is something so different and it does it so well. But I do think Mandalorian is great. I think Mandalorian is like a great sort of classic Star Wars show and what it's accomplishing. I really enjoyed Obi-Wan. I had some issues. I thought, I think it felt, I think we've talked about this. It felt like a movie that had been turned into a streaming series, and there was some bloat on it probably as a result, but I still liked it. Had some very big moments that I thought were great. Book of Boba Fett's the one that kind of didn't work for me structurally, because it was such a sort of strangely structured series. even though there was a couple of episodes that were pretty cool on that. But I think most people, I think most people, if they take a step back, they and have enjoyed The Mandalorian. It's just that this is something special. So, are you guys as sad as I am that we're not going to get 5 seasons, or does it feel like two is fine?
I don't know if most shows feel like a show that's going to go for 5 seasons is like, it's got a premise, not a storyline. It's like they all work in an ad agency. Let's see what happens. Like a show with this story driven that's taking place in like within a sort of a window in a larger story. Like I feel like that's really tough to get 5 seasons out of. I'm fine with this being the tight 2 seasons that they have planned.
I agree. And, it's nice that they've got 12 episodes rather than 8 or 6. They've got, a lot of space to tell the story in 2 seasons. I am happy that it will end after that.
I like more just because I love it. I was actually thinking maybe in my ideal world, there'd be like 3 seasons. Like maybe you do like a second season that's those the 2, 3, and 4, like, and then the final season's like the lead into Rogue One. But I do agree that I am very thankful it's a 12 episode season, that it's not like a super short one. I think that's still meaty enough.
It's not SVU. Like we don't need Andor every week to have a different, like rebel assignment he's got to do. Like if Gilroy wants to keep making Star Wars stuff, great. Give him a new era and character and story, and let him do that.
Yeah. And lastly, Darth Relum asked what's next on Disney Plus for Star Wars. 90% sure that's Mandalorian season 3. That's the one that we've seen the most footage from, and I'm fairly sure that's.
I think it's that one, and then Acolyte.
No, Ahsoka is.
Ahsoka, right? Yeah. And then Acolyte. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's it. They literally started filming Andor season 2 Monday.
Right.
Near you in the UK, Kim.
Where? I'll go and visit.
Go visit. All right, guys. Thanks for sharing Andor season 1 with us. If you're in America, have a great Thanksgiving. If you're not in America, have a great 3rd or 4th week of November. And go forth and be merry. Thanks, guys. See you next time.